Welcome to the Trinidad and Tobago Opposition's media briefing this Sunday, the 4th of August, 2024. Naveen Jindal, corruption charges, and the PNM's empty treasury. Today, we have presenting Senator Wade Mark, leader of opposition business in the Senate, and also Mr. Dominic Smith, temporary senator. We will be starting our broadcast shortly. Thank you for joining. In the meanwhile, please share the live.
Make sure the talk is done now. Time to start back the work now. All the talk done, all the talk done. Work nation!
We fed up by these people and all the bag of lies and everything that they're doing wrong, they're trying to disguise.
Always pointing fingers, never wanna take the blame.
We frustrated now, don't want no more, and we ain't taking it again.
Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause we're sick of them on the lies. Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause the country needs to shine. Talk done.
Let's get to work again. Come on, people, you know it's true.
Talk done.
Let's get to work again, cause the UNC works for you. Come on!
From there we start the engine. UNC have the plan to build a brighter future for our Twin Island.
Come on everybody, and you know it's true. It's time to start work again and the UNC works for you.
Work nation to the world. Come on!
All these years of pressure, agony and pain, but we work with them and we cope with them and we feel the blunt of the strain.
Know that. Now we the people start crying out. We can't take it no more. So election day when you ink your fingers, UNC you're voting for.
Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause we're sick of them on the lies. Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause the country needs to shine. Talk done.
Let's get to work again. Come on, people, you know it's true.
Talk done.
Let's get to work again, cause the UNC works for you.
From there we start the engine. UNC have the plan to build a brighter future for our Twin Island.
Come on everybody, and you know it's true. It's time to start work again and the UNC works for you.
Work nation. This is how we work. Come on. Tell them what we deal with.
We don't talk the talk, we just walk the walk. We don't make no joke when it's time to work.
Katrina,
We don't talk the talk,
what you say?
we just walk the walk.
Tell them.
We don't make no joke when it's time to work. Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause we're sick of them on the lies. Talk done. Let's get to work again, cause the country needs to shine. Talk done.
Good morning, members of the media. Good morning to the people of our beloved Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the United National Congress Sunday morning media briefing. We'd like to welcome all of our listeners and followers throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and those who are watching this broadcast, this live feed on the World Wide Web throughout the world. On behalf of the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisasa SC, political leader of the UNC, the executive of our party, and our membership, we'd like to warmly welcome you to this meeting of our party this morning at our headquarters in Chagonas. Today we are going to be focusing on a character who has now fled the land by the name of Navin Jindal. And we'll be also looking at what we like to describe a slew of corruption and money laundering charges facing that individual in his home country of India. And of course, we would like to examine the broken state of the financial affairs of our nation. That is, Trinidad and Tobago's economy is in danger and in great trouble. And today we have with us a young and brilliant economist who has acted on several occasions as a temporary senator. He will address the wreckage that is now the Treasury. The fact that the country is broken and the government may have maxed out its overdraft limit at the central bank, causing it to engage in massive borrowings in order to sustain expenditure. Our colleague and friend, Dominic Smith, a young and brilliant economist, will address that issue. And subsequent to his contribution, I will address two very critical issues affecting the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The Jindal scandal and the P&M association with the scandal, and what I would like to describe as the questionable and suspicious sale of the people's asset to, in fact, a company called CEL, Consolidated Energy Limited, at what appears to be an undervalued price. These are issues that are of concern to the people of Trinidad and Tobago because they are the owners, as we speak, of CLICO, 49% owners. So we will share with you our concerns surrounding these two issues. At this time, I'd like us to welcome our colleague and temporary Senator Dominic Smith, who will deal with the state of this economy and the wreckage that the P&M has brought to this economy over the last 9 years. Welcome, my colleague and friend, Dominic Smith.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mark. I want to express greetings to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to express thanks to the media who have graced us here today. I want to express thanks to our viewers on our live. I'd like to express thanks to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for being here with us today as we embark upon issues that directly impact the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And make no mistake, friends, each one of us today and in the very near future will have to come to terms with what we have been saying as a party, that the economy of Trinidad and Tobago are showing signs and symptoms of decay. It is showing signs of symptoms of structural inefficiency. It is showing signs and symbols of problems that most certainly will meet us at the front door of our steps. And whether we choose to kick the can down the road today or tomorrow or the next day or the week, very, very soon, the chickens, as they say, will come to lay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm reminded by a quote, and it says, "An economy is a delicate thing. Mishandle it, and you can destroy a society." And so, friends, I'm here to ask a few questions. And these are questions that you should also be asking. And one item that we must consider, friends, is if we are in fact doing well as a society, if our economy is in fact buoyant, as some would have us think, then the question of why are we having these issues that are plaguing our society? The question of why are we seeing rampant unemployment? The question of why are we seeing the effects of inflationary pressures? The question of why is our national debt becoming staggering and concerning as it relates to our debt to GDP ratios over the last 9 years? The big question of why, friends, our national treasury is being recklessly handled and mismanaged, and I dare say the future, our safety net, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, is being used as a proverbial ATM machine under the current administration. Why, friends, when we have such an intelligent population, must taxation be the only means for revenue generation? And so these are the questions that you must ask. You must ask citizens, why? Why is there lack of alternative revenue sources? Why have we been speaking about diversification for almost 2 decades with no intentional plans that are forthcoming from the present administration? Why, friends, after so many years as the beacon of hope in the Caribbean, as the oil and gas premier in the Caribbean, must we now hold on to the coattails of other nations in order to seem that we have some level of buoyancy? Why, friends, are we seeing the infrastructure depleting in front of very faces? Why are people suffering day by day, night by night, under the scourge of inequality, on the scourge of lack of opportunity for young people, on the scourge of rampant crime within our society? And these are the important questions. And so, when I come to you today, as your brother, as a son of the soil of Trinidad and Tobago, it is time for us to wake up and smell the proverbial coffee. Because, friends, unfortunately, we are not in a good space. And I want you to understand that we have spent almost $500 billion in the last 9 years under a PNM government. $500 billion. That is no minute sum. And the question you need to ask yourself as you sit in your living rooms on this God-given Sunday is, what are the results of your hard-earned taxpayers' dollars, this humongous $500 trillion bill that you have fitted, what is the result to your children, to yourself, to the future generations that will come in Trinidad and Tobago? And so, friends, when we consider the raw economic data, it paints a symptom of sickness in our economy. The Trinidad and Tobago economy is sick. We have a high debt to GDP ratio. We have low to stagnant growth rates. We have inflation, and when we consider food inflation, which just year on year in the first quarter of 2024 has increased by almost 2.5%. We have health increasing by almost 7+%. These are inflationary pressures that no doubt are being passed on to the man on the ground, to the layman on the street. Can you imagine we have a food import bill of over $4 billion annually? A staggering amount for a nation so small and so delicate. And so the issue of food security is also highlighted by our stagnant, inept economy. Friends, we can only look to the foreign reserves depletion over the last 9 years. We can only look to the failing of our government to bring sufficient revenue streams. We can only look at youth unemployment, which is at a staggering 11.7%, according to the CSO in 2023, in terms of its later data polls. And so we are grappling with an economy that is certainly in need of injected ideas, of innovation, of new blood, of invigoration. And the UNC has proposed many a time means and methods by which we will attack the economy of Trinidad and Tobago and bring sustainability and a future to our people. I want to consider again the issue of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and the reckless abandon by which members of parliament are accessing these funds at an increasing rate. Friends, in an article recently, the government of Trinidad and Tobago withdrew almost $160.38 million from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund as late as December 18th in 2023. And this, my friends, when you understand the purpose of the HSF, you have to understand that this is our future. This is what we use, and this is what is meant to be used in order to secure and create a buffer for hard times. In fact, the section that deals with the HSF, it says where the petroleum revenues collected in any financial year fall below the estimated petroleum revenues for that financial year, at least 10% withdrawals may be made from the fund, or whichever is the lesser amount. And so, friends, we have been accessing this fund in a way that is haphazard and that is not sustainable. And I want to put to you, from a developmental standpoint, that we should be investing our money in areas of development. You know, there was a statement made recently where we saw reported almost $14 billion was withdrawn within a short space of time. 9 months, I believe, was the statement. And the excuse given by certain members of the parliament was that we need to understand the intricacies of where this money went to. And pointingly enough, the suggestion was that this bill also must consider repayment of loans, payment of interest, etc. And I want to ask the question, therefore, are we going to borrow and borrow and borrow until there is no more to borrow? Because when you have an issue where a large percentage of your expenditure now goes into non-developmental areas in terms of repaying loans that you've taken out and have now become due, the question is, who is going to pay for the interest on these loans? And that is a greater question that we need to consider. When we go to the Parliament for the budget review, and we go to the Parliament and the Senate for the supplemental review, you would be amazed by the amount of capital that has to be put into the servicing of loans taken out by this PNM administration. And whether you believe it or not, that money comes directly out of your pocket. When you go to work and you spend your time and you consider that every month, at the end of the month, on time, there are withdrawals made from your disposable income via tax, only to have this then be borrowed upon and to reduce your future. And so development and development initiatives must take into consideration, where are we applying the money in developmental areas? What are the areas that we are investing to have a sustainable future? And one issue that has come up recently is the issue of foreign exchange shortages. As a country, we have never had an issue of foreign exchange shortages. This obviously is because we have been buoyed by our revenue generation from oil and gas. But I want you to consider that in the last 9 years, you're telling me that we have issues, that our persons who are in tune with the global economy, institutions such as the IMF, have actually cautioned Trinidad and Tobago and have suggested to us we need to take swift and accurate action to resolve our Forex issue. And you may think that this is a small problem, but I want you to consider that when RBC and other banks reduce the credit card limit of USD access to you, the persons that are being affected are not the conglomerates. It's a person on the ground who is now starting a small business, who is trying to become entrepreneurial as possible, to purchase a few goods, a few raw materials, a few manufacturing supplies, to then make a living. These are the persons who are being impacted. And now you have taken away the ability to purchase a good or service and to earn a profit. But no one is speaking about that. Think about the students that are abroad who are proud to be Trinidad and Tobagonians, who are studying in international universities and need their parents to send some US dollars, some Canadian dollars, some pounds to them so that they can pay for living expenses, etc. And now their father and their mother has to tell them, son, well, I can only access $200 to $300 at the bank teller. And so you can't pay for your meals this week. These are the questions that we need to ask. What about the mother who is in need of medication and medical attention and requires some foreign exchange in order to access medical supplies? What happens to them? Yet we see that there's an unequal access to capital and to foreign exchange in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we have a situation where there's an animal farm effect, where some are better than others, apparently. Where some animals are better than others on the farm that is Trinidad and Tobago. And that, friends, is not something that we must take lightly. I want to speak a bit about youth unemployment. We had a situation where we invested as a nation. We invested as a nation in the tertiary education system. And we have had an issue now where graduates are graduating from various institutions and they're not able to access jobs. And what is even more of an issue is that these persons are also underemployed. Now, what does that mean? It means we have engineers and we have economists and we have persons who have specialized in various medical fields that now have to ply their trade in an industry where they have no relevant experience or expertise. And this is a symptom, friends, of a diseased economy. We are suffering from what the Dutch call the Dutch disease, where we've had a situation where oil and gas has been our main producer of revenue, but we haven't taken a step back, and the PNM government has not taken a step back to be intentional in its approach to diversification. And so we have an issue now where time is passing. 9 years down the road, still no plan. 9 years down the road, no real impact in what our export future should be. No investment in AI, no investment in tourism, no real investment or impact in any of these industries that we have a natural advantage to. But we will hold on to an industry that, as we can see, the world is expanding and moving away from. Where will we be in 20 to 30 years, friends? Where will we be in 10 years? Because our Prime Minister recently in a press conference said, 9 years flies quickly. And I would say to him, yes, 9 years is flying quickly when you're having fun. When you're having fun on the golf course, certainly 9 years can pass quickly. But for the single mother in Trinidad and Tobago, and for the single father in Trinidad and Tobago, and for the person who now has to steal books to send and educate her children, unfortunate as that may be, what is 9 years to them? And these are the crucial, critical questions that we must ask as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to tell you that you cannot tax yourself into prosperity as a nation. Economics throughout the globe knows this as a fact. You cannot, as a nation, tax yourself into prosperity. But everywhere you turn in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a direct and an indirect tax. When you go to the fuel pump and your bill was initially $60 to $100 to fill your tank, now I'm speaking to persons where their price at the pump is upwards of $200. In some cases, almost $400 to fill your tank. And I ask you again, where is the $500 billion? Where has the trickle-down effect taken place under PNM administration? And this is why I preface my contribution by stating to you, we need to ask why as a nation. Considering the tax policy and the tax agenda and what is on the horizon, it is very clear to us on the UNC that behavior and decision-making is a tell. And when we consider systems thinking, purpose are deduced from behavior, not rhetoric. And so if someone is telling you one thing and their actions suggest another, believe their actions. And the tax policy in Trinidad and Tobago over 9 years is suggestive of what? A system directed and geared towards taxation as a means of revenue generation, when they should be considering alternative revenue sources and investment in those sources. And so I'm not surprised when the IMF and the Chamber of Commerce in Trinidad and Tobago points out to the current government that reforms are needed to create more business-friendly environment and attract foreign direct investment. The business community is also hampered by bureaucratic red tape and inadequate infrastructure. And my friends, make no mistake, this discourages both local and foreign investment. And let's consider an item that recently became newsworthy as well, where the central bank has now reduced the minimum reserve ratio and have moved it from 14% to 10%. I want you to ask the question, why? Is it that the government has overspent and now they require this reduction in order to create economic activity, in order to buoy the numbers at a now ending term? Ask yourself, why? So friends, another issue that came up. Can you imagine in the year 2024, in Trinidad and Tobago, a country once the jewel of the Caribbean? An article was released recently on August 3rd by Kim Boudram. 500,000 without water. Caroni plant shut down next weekend for upgrades. Can you imagine the insanity in the 21st century, in a population so small that we have a water shortage issue? But every time the rain falls, every single community is flooded out. How is that possible? And you're saying almost 30 to 40% of the population has to live without water? This is ludicrous. We cannot continue to accept this type of management, this type of inefficiency by our government. We have to hold our leaders accountable. Because if you're not doing a good job, then that job should not be yours. And the private sector would tell you so. If you're unable to perform, step aside. Let someone else, someone with innovation, with ideas, come to the forefront. So friends, we don't have water for the sick. We don't have water in our taps. We have spent trillions of dollars on non-development based initiatives over the last 9 years. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you better off under the current administration? Do you feel safe under the current administration? Do you feel that you have a future and your children have a future in Trinidad and Tobago? And these are the important questions that we need to ask. And friends, we cannot continue to pretend that these problems don't exist. We cannot continue to look away from the mirror that is in front of us as a nation. Comrades, friends, brothers, everyone viewing, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I want to say to you today that we are entering a period of great transition, and that under the United National Congress and our administration and our parliamentarians, you have a party that cares about people first. We have empathy for the trials and tribulations of our people. And that is why we are here today on this blessed Sunday. Not with our families and our friends, but here to speak to you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, because you have an important decision to make in the coming months. And I want you to make the right decision. And I want you to make that decision having reflected upon what has gone before. And so in the words of Abraham Lincoln, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And what does that say? It means that a good government, a government that abides by the principles of transparency and accountability, a government that is people first, a government that considers the vision and the future of our nation, should have the behavior associated with that desired future. And that government shall remain on the earth, meaning that government will live a long and prosperous tenure. And that is what we at the United National Congress, under the distinguished leadership of the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, that is what we bring to you today. And we will continue to fight for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But you must ask the question, why? I want to thank you. Have a great, blessed day, and I welcome my comrade and my colleague, a distinguished gentleman, a man of the people, certainly a man that has represented the people in the Parliament, in the Senate, in various capacities. He's a stalwart. He's a genius in many respects. I want to ask him to come and provide his comments and views on some major issues, and I want to thank the people of Trinidad and Tobago for their attention. Thank you.
Thank you, my colleague and friend, for your brilliant exposition on the state of this economy under this outgoing administration. Members of the media, there are two issues I would like to address this morning. The first I would like to deal with is the attempted sellout, which the people stopped dead in its tracks. Of the Petrotrin Refinery for a bottle of oil and a pound of rice. That's the first matter we need to pay attention to this morning. The second area that we like to address is the questionable and suspicious sale of CLECO's 56.53% shareholding in the Methanol Holdings International Limited to the Proman Group through its subsidiary Consolidated Energy Limited, which appears to have been sold at an undervalued price. And I will develop that as I go along so that citizens of TNT would be able to fully appreciate and understand. Now, members of the media, you would have seen in today's Express this headline. This headline, Jindal pulls out. And of course, there was also space allocated to the same subject matter in, I think, the Guardian newspaper. Now, was this surprising? Did it come as a surprise to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago? And when you read the contents of a letter purportedly written by Navin Jindal, dated July the 26th, to the Prime Minister, you would believe that letter was written in Balize House. When you read the contents of that letter, and the attempt to do what? The same thing that Dr. Rowley and his gang has been doing for the last 9 years. Blaming the opposition. If it rains too hard and it floods in Port of Spain, he blames the opposition. And you have an industrialist coming out of India, heading a company called Jindal Steel and Power Limited, facing a slew of corruption and money laundering charges, comes to this country. Not in June, when he met the Prime Minister at the Diplomatic Center on the 17th of June. No. Not when the Prime Minister went to India in May and he met the chairman of the Reliance group of companies. No. This Navin Jindal has been in Trinidad and Tobago since March of 2023. We're talking about close to about 17 months. So it is not yesterday he came here. He has been in discussions with the Prime Minister. He has been in discussion with Stuart Young and government officials for close to 17 months. But they would want us to believe that he came on the compound only recently. That is far from the truth, brothers and sisters. Now, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition raised some very pertinent issues and questions surrounding this industrialist, who, by the way, has to seek court permission and approval to travel out of India because of the severity and gravity of those 6 criminal charges of money laundering and corruption emanating out of something called the Colgate scam of India, in which it is alleged that the same Navin Jindal, it is alleged he bribed a former minister with responsibility for coal and mining of India. Now, when our leader raised the issue surrounding this individual, which we have a right to do, we are standing in the gap between a corrupt, lying, and thieving administration and the people's welfare and safety and security in Trinidad and Tobago. It is United National Congress that is providing that safety valve to avoid us from drowning like the divers drowned in Paria. That is what we are doing. And it's our duty and responsibility as the opposition and the alternative government and the government in waiting to raise issues surrounding the public interest involving anyone, be it Navin Jindal, be it Butch Stewart, the late Butch Stewart, and the scandal with Sandals, be it involving the Chinese, who the government was given a contract to build 5,000 homes and giving them all kinds of concessions, giving them the kitchen and all the utensils in that kitchen before he was exposed. And then worst of all, he went to California some time ago, got 2 electricians, and said that these people are interested in purchasing or leasing our multi-billion-dollar refinery. That is the stuff that the Prime Minister is made of. He takes little time to do a due diligence on anything, on anybody, or so he would like us to believe. So the leader of the opposition raised the issue and asked the Prime Minister to come clean on this deal. Because we learned that the gentleman was lining up to make a bid or to put in a bid for our flagship refinery and by extension the integrated Petrotrin that this government deliberately, calculatedly shut down and placed close to 10,000 people on the breadline since November 30th, 2018. That is what this government did. So we asked the Prime Minister, what is the link between Jindal and the President of Venezuela? We have information that a deal was struck in April of this year for the same gentleman and his company to get involved in the oil business in the Orinoco, I think. Anyway, there's some, I think it's the Orinoco, if I'm not mistaken, Delta in terms of oil exploration. That is what we understand. There was a deal. We asked the Prime Minister to come clean on that. Was that particular deal linked to the refinery? We also understand that he bought or he planned to invest $800 million in an iron ore plant in Venezuela. So we asked the Prime Minister to come clean on this gentleman and whether he's prepared to do business with a gentleman with such a checkered record and past. Well, the Prime Minister responded angrily. He called us idiots, and the real idiot is the Prime Minister. And he said that we were chasing away investors. Nothing could be further from the truth, because under the UNC, led by the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar as our Prime Minister, we attracted billions of US dollars in foreign direct investment. That is our record. Instead, the reverse is taking place under this administration, where you have a reversal of foreign direct investment, and we are minus foreign direct investment under this administration. So these are some of the issues that we sought to clarify with the Prime Minister. But the Prime Minister will not answer. And he goes on, as I said, blaming everyone for his incompetence and his inability to manage and run our country. So, ladies and gentlemen, what has happened? We have a situation where the Prime Minister told Trinidad and Tobago, and we don't know what is the link, but we have to find out what is the link. In the Express, dated Friday, the 26th of July, 2024, this is the headline. Trinidad and Tobago gifted oil and rice by Indian firm. That is what we read in the Express. This is what we read in the Express. So we are asking questions. The company that is gifting us some 2 or 3 metric tons of rice, equivalent to 55 to 60,000 pounds, and a container of cooking oil. The name of the company, members of the media, if I may tell you, is known as HAFED. HAFED is the acronym for what is called the Haryana State Cooperative Supply and Marketing Federation Limited, HAFED. And when we examine this company carefully, we realize that the late brother of Navin Jindal, whose name was Prakash, was the chief minister of the Haryana state. And he had a very close relationship with this same company called HAFED. So we ask the question, is there a link between cooking oil and rice and the attempt to sell out our Petrotrin refinery? We ask these questions because we find it very strange that all of a sudden the government could claim these people came from nowhere and provided this particular gift to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government was so pleased about it that they took a decision to call on the Minister of Trade to arrange to have that rice and oil shipped to this country and to allow who? The Minister of Social Development and Family Services to distribute to the needy. So we ask the question, is there a link between HAFED, this state cooperative, and Jindal Steel and Power Limited? But what was even more interesting is that the Anti-Corruption Bureau of India in the Haryana state arrested the manager, the general manager of this same HAFED on corruption charges, bribery and corruption charges, and other senior officials. So you have this company and its leading lights being arrested and charged on corruption charges. Did our Prime Minister do a due diligence before he accepted this gift? We don't know. But we did our due diligence and we saw what was taking place with this particular company. And we asked the question whether this was taking place simultaneously with an application or a bid for our refinery. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, it does not end there. When we did our research, we discovered in a document called Business Standard, it's a newspaper out of India, dated sometime the 26th of July 2024, there appears a story in that particular Business Standard. And it reads as follows. And I want to tell you before I read this for you. Jindal Steel and Power Limited got all development rights in 2006-2007 to develop mining ore in the mines of Bolivia. He got a contract to develop the mining industry and to export iron ore out of Bolivia. That was in 2006, 2007. He promised to invest $1.2 billion in the first instance. And after 5 years, he will invest another $2.1 billion US dollars. The president at that time was a fellow called Evo Morales. Members of the media, you know what happened? The same playbook that we saw with rice and cooking oil repeated itself, but in another form in Bolivia, this time involving Mr. Jindal himself and his company. They formed a company in Bolivia. And I quote from this article in the Business Standard. To win over locals, this company headed or owned by the Jindal Group initiated medical checkups, camps, where free medicine was distributed, vaccinated over 6,000 pets and street animals, donated over 2,000 fans to various schools, and sponsored fumigation drives that reach some 35,000 people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what is going on here. It is in this article in the Standard Business of India. So in Bolivia, free medical camps, free medicine and vaccination for pets, fumigation drive, and fans for school. In Trinidad and Tobago, cooking oil and rice. So that is part of the playbook of this Jindal group, because this is what happened in Bolivia. But even though the gentleman promised to invest $1.2 billion US dollars in the first 5 years in establishing an integrated steel plant in Bolivia, what happened? After 8 years, nothing was done in Bolivia. It forced the government of Bolivia to seize at the bank some 36 million US dollars because of the failure of the Jindal group to invest what they claim they would have invested in Bolivia, resulting in Jindal taking the Bolivian government and the Bolivian company owned by the government of Bolivia to the International Court of Arbitration. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, you go to Wikipedia, and it is here in Wikipedia where the matter was taken by Jindal to who? The International Court of Arbitration. And he lost that case. He had to pay the cost of 740,000 US dollars. And at the end of the day, he had to pay $1.5 million in costs to the Bolivian government. You know what happened at the end of the day? He ran out of Bolivia without investing really any serious capital in the project that he promised the Bolivian people. So, ladies and gentlemen of the media, what I am trying to tell you, this is smart manism at work. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago was prepared to sell out our flagship company to a man who has had a checkered record in Bolivia. I do not know if they did a due diligence on his activities in Bolivia, but that is what happened in Bolivia. So how can we take seriously this gentleman's attempt to blame the opposition? He's attempting to blame the opposition along with his colleague, the Prime Minister. For what? Him not having an interest any longer in our refinery. Ladies and gentlemen, if we take what has happened in Bolivia and we translate it to Trinidad and Tobago, it is the same playbook at work. Jindal had no intention whatsoever in investing in Trinidad and Tobago. He had no intentions. Just as how he had no intentions of investing in Bolivia, he had no intentions of investing in Trinidad and Tobago. He has assessed the risks that is involved. He's in Venezuela. We all know what is going on in Venezuela, disputed elections. He is supposed to be involved in some oil exploration in the Orinoco Delta. He is weighing the risks. He's not a fool. And I want to tell the Prime Minister, you are on your last days. You are the outgoing Prime Minister. Keep your dirty paws off our assets. Take and remove your filthy hands from the people's assets. Do not touch our refinery. You are going out of office. Leave that refinery to the incoming UNC administration to address. And you can run, Mr. Prime Minister, but you can't hide. You have a way of blaming the opposition for everything. We know your playbook. Your playbook is to blame the UNC for everything and to blame Kamla and to blame the UNC. That is your playbook. We know that. So you have taught your friend Navin Jindal The same lesson. So in his letter, he attempts also to blame the opposition and to blame the UNC. We take no advice from Navin Jindal. We are the loyal opposition. We are committed to the rule of law. We are committed to the rule of law. And we will uphold the constitution of our republic. India has a large democracy and they have laws. That is why Jindal is facing 6 corruption and money laundering charges. We might be a small democracy, but Mr. Jindal, if the Prime Minister misled you that we have no laws in this country, we have laws. And you have to thank the opposition because you might have been facing serious criminal charges in this country had you not pulled out. The government has breached the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act by favoring you, by meeting you alone and leaving out 9 other bidders. That is going to lead to serious court matters. So let us understand what's going on here. So I just wanted to put and to set the record straight. Don't try to scapegoat us for your sins of omission and commission. Mr. Jindal and your riding partner, the Prime Minister. We are committed to protecting and safeguarding the public interest. That is what we are about. And we will not hesitate to rise in their defense at all times. That is the people. Ladies and gentlemen, the other matter I just want to deal with briefly has to do with what I have described as the questionable and suspicious sale of the people's asset in MHIL amounting to 56.53% to the Proman Group, which appears to have been sold at an undervalued price. Now, many of you would know that Methanol Holdings International Limited is majority owned by CLICO, and the other shareholder is Consolidated Energy Limited. There's a plant in Oman which has CLICO as majority shareholder. It has this company called CEL as another shareholder, and the government of Oman. Now, the people of this country owns 49% of CLICO. So the taxpayers have a big interest in what goes on at CLICO and what goes on at this particular Methanol Holdings Limited. So we have a situation that has developed, ladies and gentlemen, in which the government, through CLICO, decided to sell some 36% of those shares, and the first person or company that was given that opportunity to buy those shares was the Proman Group. After a while, they refused to, or they didn't take up the offer. What happened subsequently, ladies and gentlemen? CLICO offered the shares to Corporation Sol. And we are told by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Brian Manning, that Corporation Sol took up 20% or just under 19.67%. And NIF, the National Investment Fund, took up 17%. They signed a shareholders agreement, they signed valuation agreement, they signed sale and purchase agreement, they signed up valuation report. And that was sometime in April, no, it was in January, February of 2022. And the next thing we learned, ladies and gentlemen, was in the month of December. I have the data here to share with you. In the month of December, what did we see, ladies and gentlemen? We saw this in the Guardian. We saw this in the Guardian. The 27th of December. The government moved from 36% members of the media, and they sold the entire 56.53% to the Proman Group. And there's Mr. David Cassidy, who is the president and CEO, shaking the hands of the Prime Minister. Done deal. Now, this is a very lucrative plant owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago, operating out of Oman. Members of the media, do you know that they have a 30-year gas contract? Oman supplies 30 years of uninterrupted gas supply to this particular company. And they have a take or pay it arrangement. For every ton of methanol produced, they take that ton of methanol. So this is a lucrative plant. Why would the government wish to dispose of such a lucrative plant? That is what we want to find out from the government. So we have been asking the government to produce the shareholders agreement, to produce the sale and purchase agreement, to produce the valuation agreement, to produce the valuation report. Up to this time as we speak, we cannot get those reports and agreements, ladies and gentlemen. And then you had this December sale, and we asked for the same agreements and reports, and we cannot have reports, we cannot have agreements. But members of the media, I want to bring something to your attention, which is what is leading me to call on behalf of the people for an independent forensic investigation into this whole matter of the sale of the 56.53% shares. Members of the media, do you know how much we sold our 56.53% shares for? 347 million US dollars. You know what that's equivalent to? $2.4 billion. And you know what is even more sad about this thing? Members of the media, I have the data here. I have the data. In 2016, when this CLICO was under central bank control, the value, the carrying value of MHIL was 2.369 billion. In 2017, it was 2.369 billion. It moved, same thing. In 2018, it went up to 2.583 billion. In 2018, it remained the same, 2.583 billion. In 2019, 2.583 billion. In 2020, 2.538 billion. In 2020, same, In 2021, same. You know what happened in 2022? It went down to $2.2 billion from 2.583. Imagine the auditors, KPMG, was denied access to all the working papers that would have shown them the valuation techniques used by CLICO to determine these values. You know, ladies and gentlemen, the Auditor General in 2018, 2019, 2020 produced what is called qualified opinions. In 2020, 2021, 2022, he produced also disclaimer opinions. Could you imagine? No valuations, qualifications, disclaimer. Yet still, CLICO, which is 49% owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago, was sold for $2.4 billion to the Proman Group. We think, brothers and sisters, that a Machiavellian plot was in fact executed to conceal the true value, the fair market value of the MHIL 56.53% shareholdings of CLICO. And therefore, there's a report, ladies and gentlemen. This is it. It is a report that the central bank has to table in the parliament every quarter. This is the last report that was tabled in November. You know, nowhere in this report the name of the valuer is mentioned. We were told by the Prime Minister and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance that a company called, that is a valuator, by the name of Charles Rivers and Associates, conducted a valuation on that asset of MHIL. You know, nowhere in this report can you find it. Nowhere in the annual financial statement can you find that valuation report. Under Section 44D of the Central Bank Act, before you can dispose of any asset under the central bank supervision owned by CLICO, they must have an independent valuation report so that you and I and the people can see. No such report was ever produced. And you know what is even more alarming as I close? Members of the media. There are questions that many people have to answer. There's a lady called Mrs. Claire Gomez Miller. She was the executive director from 2018 until, brothers and sisters, when she left in October last year. The new chairman is a lady called Jennifer Frederick. It was under her watch that you had qualified opinions in 2018 right up to 2022 into 2023. The governor of the central bank, who relinquished control over the supervision of CLICO on the 1st of December 2022. The governor didn't see these qualified opinions. He didn't see the disclaimers. What did the governor do about this? And why did the governor not place in this final report that was tabled in Parliament the valuation report purportedly generated by Charles Rivers and Associates? So we call on the governor of the central bank, Dr. Alvin Hillier, to tell Trinidad and Tobago why you did not include in your final report before you exited from the supervision of CLICO on the 1st of December why you did not put in this report the valuation report from Charles Rivers and Associates. Was that accidental? We don't know. So we call on the governor of the central bank. We call on the lady in charge of CLICO, Jennifer Frederick. We call on the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister to produce the following documents. 1, the shareholders agreement. 2, the sale and purchase agreement. 3, the valuation agreement. 4, the valuation report. And by the way, we have been told that there were court orders preventing CLICO from sharing critical information with the auditors that they hired because there was some court order. Try as we may to get that court order. It is not in their notes to their accounts. You cannot find this order. And that order was there from 2018 until they sold the asset to Proman in 2022. When that was sold, order disappeared. So we call on the government to produce that court order prohibiting CLICO from sharing with their auditors, KPMG, internal, critical, significant audit reports and working papers, including valuation techniques and unobservable quantitative inputs into that particular process. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought I should raise this because we believe that something has gone wrong at CLICO, and we therefore are calling for an independent forensic investigation into all the circumstances surrounding the sale of that very important asset owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago to the Proman Group through what is called Consolidated Energy Limited. So, ladies and gentlemen of the media, sorry that I took so long, but I thought that these two issues are very pertinent and important for public consumption, and we need the government to come clean. And in closing, I want the Prime Minister and Stuart Young to tell the country when they visited the Proman Group in Switzerland in September of 2022, whether they took any public servants with them, whether that meeting was a secret meeting, whether that meeting was a meeting designed to sell out MHIL to the Proman Group. Can the Prime Minister produce the notes to that meeting for public consumption? Are there notes that he can produce so that we can understand what matters were discussed with the Proman Group when he and Stuart Young visited their headquarters sometime in September of 2022? Members of the media, I'll pause at this time, and my colleague and I would be willing to answer any question that you would like to pose at this time as it relates to the matters that we have raised. So you could come, my colleague. Yes, members of the media.
I get it, Mr. Mark, Guardian, Derek Atram from the Guardian Media here. Is the UNC pleased with the outcome of the due diligence and investigative work that the result now that, Mr. Jindal has essentially pulled out of any deal? I think you would have touched on it, but, is there any satisfaction from you guys that, that you were able to stop something nefarious from occurring?
What I would say, my colleague, is simply this. There's an old saying, birds of the same feather flock together. Show me your friends, and I will tell you who you are. I find it very strange And I'm not casting any aspersions on anyone. I find it strange that the government of this country find themselves being associated with some very questionable and suspicious characters and companies whose track record in terms of performance and experience leave a lot to be desired. I don't know if you recall, we did the work. They got 2 electricians before the country knew they were electricians. We did the research because they were actually promoting these people as the persons to take over the Petrotrin refinery. You know Petrotrin is worth billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And the government found itself associating with 2 electricians out of California operating in a suite in California. So it is passing strange that a government with all the resources at its disposal could not have Googled Jindal, Steel and Power Limited, corruption, money laundering, and they would not have been able to discover that this man was involved since in 2004, 2006 in a coal gate scam in which he is alleged to have gotten a block to produce coal unlawfully. And it is alleged he bribed the minister with responsibility for coal mining in India, who has now been charged by the Central Bureau of Investigation of India. It is passing strange. And as I said, I am not casting aspersions on anybody's character. All I'm saying is that the government has a duty of care to protect the welfare, the well-being, and the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and not go about in a willy-nilly fashion, doing things without any let or hindrance or any real concerns for the well-being of the people.
Mr. Mark, Mr. Smith, today you highlighted a series of issues with the economy, and Mr. Smith would have raised concerns with the constant drawing down on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and you would have raised concerns about the sale of the Methanol Holdings International shareholdings, Squeaco Zone, to Promon, and also this potential deal which is clearly off the table now. Is there concern from the opposition that the government is basically maxing out the debt, and while spending all the savings and selling out the assets of the country in order just to run the country essentially on a day-to-day basis? And potentially with an election coming up next year, if the UNC comes into power again, what will be left to work with in these circumstances?
Well, before my colleague answers, what I can tell you, there's a document I ask you to put your hands on. It is the affidavit of the Minister of Finance when he was forced to approach the Court of Appeal in a matter involving the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. In that document, he made it very clear that the deficit was about $10 billion. My colleague raised in his contribution the recent reduction in the primary cash reserve requirement by the central bank or of the central bank. Now, It went from 14% to 10%. What does that mean? There is more liquidity in the system. By going from 14 to 10%, $4.2 billion is now in the system. Who is going to mop up that money? The government. Because the government has borrowed in the month of May $1 billion from Royal Merchant Bank of the Caribbean. And they have borrowed another $1 billion from Republic Bank. You know why? Our information is that they have maxed out the overdraft at the central bank. So they cannot borrow any money from the central bank. So what is this government doing? Drawing down on the HSF to pay salaries and to fund recurrent expenditure. And they are borrowing in order to pay recurrent expenditure and to pay debt. So what this man is doing, the Minister of Finance and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Do you know our foreign exchange reserves stand as we speak just under 5.8 billion US dollars? In 2014, it was 11.5. When we left in 2015, it was 10.5 billion. We are now just about 5.8 billion dollars, just about 6 to 7 months import cover. So what you have taken place in our country, high deficits, high national debt, fallen HSF funding. We are just about 5.6 billion in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And what is this government doing? Putting more pressure on the backs of the poor people. Property tax, electricity rates, new one waiting to come, new water rates coming, and the cost of living crisis is a nightmare for people. And you offer workers a 4% increase, 4 cents on every dollar, when the cost of living and inflation has gone through the roof for people. So what you are asking is quite relevant. The government is preparing a bed of thorns for the incoming administration because they have bankrupted the country, and the country is broke, and they have crushed the economy of TNT. I'll ask my economist friend to add.
Thanks, comrade. I just want to say, in terms of the two items you mentioned, one, in terms of the sale of assets that we currently have, if you look at the evidence, Trinidad is what we call on a fire sale. What does that mean in terms of the financial sector? It means that we have assets, and typically, market makers will tell you, buy low and sell high. So we're in trouble. We're selling out anything we could get our hands on to make up the revenue numbers that will sustain us, not only for the year, but in years to come. So we have a fire sale occurring in Trinidad and Tobago that is, one, questionable, and two, we don't know if people are acting in the best interests of the public, both in the short and medium term, right? You have the issues of Petrotrin, you have the issues of as my colleague would have mentioned, the other interested parties. And the big question you need to ask yourself is, why now? Why now, when revenue is on the decline, there's low oil production, the manufacturing sector cannot make up the difference or the variance that we need in terms of running the country? Why is there now a pressure to start the TTRA? Why is there pressure now in terms of property tax? Why is there pressure now in terms of the reduction and the removal of subsidies as it relates to oil and gas and gas at the pump? And the evidence is there. The evidence is that we have run out of money, that we are now trying our best to out small fires on our coattails, and that is why we are looking at our most valuable assets, which I might add are now deplenished and are at its lowest point in terms of what it would have been sellable. You have a situation where Petrotrin has been, on the chopping block for 4+ years, and now is the time you decide it is quite pertinent and relevant to sell No, you sell assets when they are at their highest, not when they are at their lowest. So all of this points to one direction. It's either the PNM administration is mad, 2, the finance minister doesn't know what he's doing, or 3, we're definitely under some serious financial constraints. All right, so these are the critical issues that we need to consider. All right, and the private sector will also tell you that. When last have you seen the chamber be so vocal in terms of the structural requirements and the structural adjustments that need to take place in Trinidad and Tobago? Everyone is becoming vocal because the writing is on the wall. We have what I call a Humpty Dumpty approach to economics right now in Trinidad and Tobago. And what happened to Humpty Dumpty? All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty together again. And so we have to look at our Caribbean brothers and our South American colleagues, and we have to now tag along on their economic prosperity. That is where we are in 2024. Can you imagine? We are no longer the ATM, quote unquote. We are the beggars on the block. So that's all I'll have to say on the financial issues. But we really need to, in terms of what we plan on doing, there's a lack of innovation, there's a lack of idea creation, and there's a lack of intent. Because where there's intention, there's purpose, and where there's purpose, action follows. And this government, unfortunately, on matters of economy, have been not taking action whatsoever.
Yes. Any further questions, comrade? Okay. Well, may I, on behalf of my colleague and on behalf of the party, to thank members of the media for gracing us with their presence for our Sunday morning, now afternoon press briefing at our headquarters in Chaguanas today. I want to close again by warning this government not to put your filthy paws or hands on the assets of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Your time is up. An election is about to be called anytime now, between now and August. Don't believe here is Venezuela. You are not Maduro. This is Trinidad and Tobago. So keep your filthy paws off the hands of the people's assets. You are outgoing. Allow the incoming government to address these matters. Okay? So that is what we like to leave with Dr. Rowley and his gang of wrongdoers. The PNM is known as the Brotherhood of Wrongdoers. They are always associated with wrongdoers, be it Navin Jindal, be it the group from Haryana state called Half Fed, wanting to kind of bribe the population. Imagine this man had the audacity to talk about opposition, and opposition have to be constructive, and we could pose a security issue and stability. And imagine that. He's talking about ethics in business. A man who is facing 6 criminal charges for money laundering and corruption. And he wants to talk to us about stability and security and ethics. Look, Jindal, Navin Jindal, good riddance. Thank you, members of the media. Members of the media, thank you very much. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.
We stand united in the belief that if you empower a community, the community empowers the country.
We are the party that gave every child a secondary school education since 2001.
By building more schools in 11 years than others did in 40. We believe that no child,
rich or poor, should be left behind.
which is why we give every 4-month student a laptop, to expand their minds and their dreams.
We are the party that put police cars back on the streets
And gave the police a $1,000 bonus because we believe that we should support the persons who are protecting you.
We are the party that reduced the murder rate to its lowest in 14 years. We expanded GATE, stopped the property tax, and increased maternity leave.
We are the party that invested in you and your community by investing in schools, community centers, lighted parks, 24-hour health centers, and the most extensive road repair program in decades.
We believe that education is always a solution and that no one should have to pick between sending their child to school or buying food.
We are the party that works for you. We are the first responders in every situation, working to deliver a better standard of living for you and your family.
And most importantly, we have confidence in you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This is not a campaign, it's a movement based on building communities and strengthening families.
Come out and join us, and together we will get the nation working and moving again. Our children will once again have access to GATE and technology.
We will improve healthcare.
By cutting the time it takes to see a doctor in an emergency, we will establish a senior citizen unit in every major hospital and staff the hospital with the doctors and nurses you need to create a first-class healthcare system. We will focus on creating high-paying jobs, fixing our laws to remove red tape, and ensuring that you and your family are safer. We will reduce corporate taxes to jumpstart the economy, create a special investment zone along the East-West corridor, and work with entrepreneurs to build a digital economy. This is an investment in your community to move the nation forward and get TNT working again.
Whether you are from 4th Street in Barataria to Railway Road in Dow Village, from Green Street in Tunapuna to Clark Road in Dibay, from La Hoqueta to Moruga, from Mayaro to Scarborough, we are one people with the same dreams of a better tomorrow. And when we stand together, we win together. We are UNC and proud.